Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Malcolm Chalmers. I'm the Deputy Director General here at RUSI. And one of the great things about being a senior member of staff here is that you get to do gigs like this, but other people do all the work. And I'd like in particular to thank Carlos and his fantastic team here at... there you are, Carlos. In the background, as usual. Carlos, you were supposed to start, weren't you? No. But let me go ahead and get started anyway. For all the great work he's been doing in Latin American security issues. And I think this conference is really testament to your success and our success in raising the profile of Latin American security issues in this country. Not always on the top of the political agenda here, but I think we'd all agree, in this room at least, that events demonstrate the importance of Latin America to the UK and indeed to global security. And you brought together a great group of people here. We've got a number of really interesting panels ahead of us today, but also an opportunity to network and realise the depth of talent there is in Latin American security issues in the UK. Just some housekeeping rules. Please, if you have not already done so, turn your phones to silent. That would be appreciated particularly by the speakers. The whole day will be entirely on the record, so you are free to tweet or indeed to report on anything said during the day. And it's also going to be live streamed, and there will be some facility for those online to ask questions in writing if there is time. And to get us started, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Baroness Jenny Chapman of Darlington, who is Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Latin America and the Caribbean in the FCDO. She served as Member of Parliament for Darlington, where I think she grew up, in County Durham in the northeast of England from 2010 until 2019, then as Political Secretary to Keir Starmer, who became Labour leader in 2020, joined the House of Lords in 2021 and has been serving as a Foreign Minister since Labour returned to power in July last year. I'm very pleased. Once the Minister has given her initial presentation, I will ask her some questions, and then we'll throw it open to yourselves to ask any other questions you'd like to ask. Minister, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Malcolm. I was just saying to Malcolm before we came in that the last time I was here was to hear Douglas Alexander speak. And this was at a time before Brexit, before COVID. We had a coalition government. He was the shadow foreign secretary then, and it was much in the world has changed since. But it's been far too long. That was, I think, 2014, so 11 years ago. And I hope that I'll be back here a little, well, let's see if I'll be invited back here after this morning. But anyway, thank you, Malcolm, for that very warm introduction. And good morning, everyone. Bom dia, buenos dias a todos y todas. If you're joining us from Latin America, as I believe some people are online, thank you for getting up so early to be with us. Muchas gracias. My Spanish is atrocious, but I am getting some lessons, so hopefully that will be improving soon. And as the Brazilian ambassador reminded me yesterday, a little bit of Portuguese wouldn't go amiss either, so I'll be working on that. But before I say anything else, I do want to thank RUSI for bringing us together for the third Latin America Security Conference, and to all of you for making this a priority. I have a passion for Latin America, and it's great when you get the opportunity to be in a room full of other people that share that view. When I meet with Latin American leaders, they tell me that they do feel that they have an important role to play alongside the UK. Nobody has told me that they feel ignored by the UK, which is good, but they have all said that they have a desire to be more included in the future. The geopolitics that we all spend our time trying to understand and to shape drives and shapes the prospects for many of the people of Latin America, whether that's climate change, economic growth and security in every sense. Our priorities there exactly as they are priorities for us here. The war in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, the role of China, US elections, all influence the politics of Latin America. Throw in the descent of Venezuela into autocracy and our as yet unending tragedy that is Haiti, and we have got a lot to talk about together. As we approach 200 years of bilateral relations with Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, we should consider how far we've come, but also what needs to come next. Speaking recently to the next generation of officer cadets at the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth, some 200 years since John Illingworth and Admiral Lord Cochrane supported growing independence across the region, our defence and security cooperation is strong. In Latin America, there is pride in our past relationships and a strong sense that we should do more, not less, together in the future. Combating serious organised crime to protect our communities here as well as there, including the heinous trade in human misery that is illegal migration, getting urgent humanitarian relief to those bearing the brunt of natural disasters across the region, pursuing Antarctic science and wider marine protection. Perhaps the fact that the UK has positive relationships in Latin America, the fact that it is a relatively peaceful, safe, democratic region means the spotlight doesn't rest on it all that often from here in the UK. But I see a vibrant, growing, open, industrious region of the world without which this government will find it that much harder to achieve our missions of growth, security, and climate action. Looking across Latin America, the lesson is clear. Without security, you can't have growth, and without growth, climate action is impossible. As we've all said hundreds of times, the first responsibility of every government, the bedrock on which the economy sits, and the ultimate guarantor of everything we hold dear, is security. While the focus of our attention is rightly on wars in Europe and the Middle East, Latin America has led the news twice in recent days here in the UK. Extraordinary though that is. And I know, because I've spoken to them, that Colombia and Panama do not always welcome the reason for this attention. There is a place for Latin American countries in geopolitics now that is changing. With attention, I think, being positive, comes opportunity. Panama, no longer on the financial services grey list, stable, democratic, and inviting infrastructure investment from the UK, we're seen as a respectful, trusted partner, and they want to do business with us. Latin American countries really do want to work with the UK. They see the value of our tailored long-term offer in the investment and security space. We can be proud of it, but we need to make it easier for countries in Latin America to do business with us. And I would like to thank Ecuador, particularly at the moment, for their term on the Security Council, because we have so much in common with them. As independent nations, we must all stand firm in the face of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, particularly as Russia turns its sights on Latin America as a key target for disinformation, because we know the truth. This illegal and unprovoked war by a permanent member of the UN Security Council is a flagrant violation of the UN Charter and the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And it makes us all, wherever we are, less safe. And with so much strong support for Ukraine from across Latin America, I know you'll be looking forward to hearing from Jaroslav Bryswick from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs later today on deepening dialogue and cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean. We're not the only country who sees Latin America's strategic relevance and weight. We know our allies in the US are considering their approach as well. Secretary Rubio's first foreign trip is to the region. He spoke in his confirmation hearing about the positive relationships as well as the challenges that the US faces. It demonstrates the centrality of Latin America for US foreign policy. And that's not a bad thing. And whilst we might not always agree on the specifics every day of this approach or that, we believe we must continue to be in close dialogue with the region and the US to work towards common goals. When it comes to China's engagement in the region, we must understand why so many Latin American countries pursue partnerships with China on development, investment, and trade. But our job, where we can, is to provide Latin America with a choice, an alternative many say that they want, maybe not always cheaper, but better. And from now on, our approach to China will be consistent, cooperating where we can, competing where we have different interests, but challenging where we must. But the most important thing about this is consistency. The schizophrenic posturing doesn't work. It's about calm, straightforward diplomacy, never ignoring issues where we fundamentally disagree, such as the detention of Jimmy Lai, but cooperating where it's in our interests, especially on climate and growth. But we know that sustainable growth can't happen without security. Criminal gangs are multinational. Their power to inflict misery while making billions feeds off weak state institutions, drives corruption, deforestation, drug deaths, and sex trafficking. They pursue profit at any cost, with little cost to themselves, through the production and trafficking of cocaine and other illegal drugs, destroying lives, communities, and ecosystems in the process. Where organised crime gangs are in competition with the state, this is why our role in supporting the peace process in Colombia, this shows us why it is so vital. Illegal mining, the loss of species, human rights abuses, organised migration crime, the channeling of illicit finance, modern slavery, I could go on. The impact is being felt now in Latin America and on the streets of Britain. Most of the world's cocaine is produced in Latin America. It transits through Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, before being trafficked via increasingly complex global routes, entering the UK via European ports. But let's be honest with ourselves about this. It is cocaine demand in this country that is fueling so much misery and insecurity across Latin America. A kilo of cocaine is worth about £1,600 at the start of its journey in Latin America, but by the time it reaches the UK, its value leaps by more than 1,600% to more than £28,000, and that is one hell of a margin, and that's why this trade is so pervasive. So we're working with France and the Netherlands on joint approaches to tackle maritime cocaine trafficking from Latin America into the UK, and we're working with our partners across the region on this as well. This includes £19 million from the UK across 6 Latin American countries over 5 years. This is not just about seizures. We're backing our partners' efforts to following the money, building stronger regional links, and tackling the flow of illicit finance. In Ecuador, we're working with our partners to make sure fewer vulnerable people fall prey to transnational drugs cartels, whether as victims and perpetrators of serious organised crime, as well as working alongside US law enforcement to conduct regular counter-narcotic and other illicit trafficking operations in the Caribbean Sea. Talking face-to-face with the brave specialist law enforcement teams in Ecuador, Colombia, and the Caribbean, it is clear to me just how much they value UK expertise and support and how much value we can add to their operations, because we listen to their needs, respect their expertise, and we are partners with them for the long term. In Peru, Brazil, and Ecuador, we're working together to make financial investigations into mining and logging crimes more effective. In Colombia, working with state institutions to improve the enforcement of environmental law is at the heart of our work for forest protection, because we can't protect a single stick of rainforest if it is regional governments that do that, but we can help them with the tools they need to do the job, with access to satellite imagery, intelligence and security cooperation, support with judicial processes, police kit, registration of vehicles. Where we can help, we must. The Home Office is working with the courageous Colombian police in Bogotá as part of their work developing key partnerships to identify and disrupt threats to the UK border, from illegal migration and the trafficking of drugs. It is together that we're now using advanced technical equipment, enhanced analytical and detection techniques, and improved intelligence flows to strengthen border security and our collective ability to detect and prevent the movement of cocaine to the UK and Europe, in Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and Peru. I've also made it my priority in my early months in the job to improve our departmental cooperation with the Home Office, the Ministry of Defence, and the NCA. The new joint Home Office FCDO migration unit will strengthen cooperation across Whitehall and our efforts on the ground. The Latin America that hundreds of thousands of UK citizens visit today is 660 million strong and counting, with a combined GDP of nearly $6 trillion. And happily, in all my visits to the region, as well as our conversations in the UK, our partners across Latin America have made it clear that they share this government's ambition to achieve long-term, resilient growth and bring opportunity to people across our countries. This is something we're working together to achieve across a vast range of work. In Chile, during my visit at the start of the year, I saw how Anglo-American are introducing innovative, safer, and more responsible techniques. Extraordinary, as someone who comes from the northeast of England, married to son of Welsh miners, to see a remotely operated mine without mining. Obviously, there's no decarbonisation, but this is mining that's being done from the centre of Santiago out in a mine with nobody underground, nobody's life at risk. It is really something to behold. When I travelled to President Sheinbaum's inauguration in Mexico, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Mexican Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, which will boost trade, advance sustainable agriculture, and renew our partnership. At the end of last year, the UK became the first European nation to accede to the growing Indo-Pacific trade bloc, the CPTPP, joining Chile, Mexico, and Peru. This makes our collective GDP £12 trillion, means zero tariffs for more than 90% of exports between members, and opens up market opportunities across 3 continents. And building on the 4 agreements with the region we already have, this does represent a huge opportunity for business. But of course, none of this is possible if the bigger picture is not in place, which brings me to peace and democracy. Latin America is now home to many stable democracies. We share so many values, and we're working together on upholding human rights, the rule of law, across the region and at the UN. When it comes to the Falkland Islands, our position is steadfast. Our commitment to defending the Falkland Islanders' right to self-determination will never waver. Only the Falkland Islanders can and should decide their own future. This approach underpins the South Atlantic Cooperation Agreement with Argentina, announced by the Foreign Secretary and former Argentine Foreign Minister Diana Mondino last September. We're grateful for our work in partnership and our dialogue on these issues with Argentina. When it comes to Colombia, this government will advocate for implementation of the 2016 peace agreement as a priority. We've learned ourselves through Northern Ireland that no piece of paper on its own achieves peace. It's the consistent work of decades by political and community leaders that keeps peace. Peace is hard, it requires constant vigilance, but the UK is with Colombia for the long term on this journey. And as the impact of Venezuela's catastrophic leadership is being felt across the region, that is why the UK sanctioned 15 new members of Nicolas Maduro's regime, who are responsible for undermining democracy and committing serious human rights abuses on 10th of January, the same day he asserted power illegitimately in Venezuela once again. And at a time when we know that you're all worried about the wider impacts of the abhorrent violence in Haiti, as well as providing £28 million a year to the multilateral institutions still operating on the ground to support the population, we are providing £5 million to the Kenyan-led multinational security support mission, working to bring about the stability that is so desperately needed to pave the way for free and fair elections. However far away that prospect feels today, we must never give up hope. No country can do right by its citizens or play its part in the world where its people live in fear and without hope. Our determination to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss binds us together. The region is home to so many of the natural assets on which our global prosperity depends. A quarter of the world's tropical rainforests, including the mighty Amazon, and massive deposits of the metals and the minerals we all need to make a leap to clean energy. The government welcomes the strong leadership we're seeing from within the region, building on generations of care led by Indigenous people and decades of pioneering innovation. We're working together with Brazil to make the next big climate summit in Belém a success. And I'm delighted that Brazil and Chile are working with us through the finance mission of the new Global Clean Power Alliance that the Prime Minister launched at the G20 in Rio with President Lula last year. When it comes to minerals that are critical to the transition away from fossil fuels and toward clean energy, including 2/3 of the world's lithium reserves that we need for batteries, Latin America has the resources and the UK holds the markets and the institutions. So we're working together across government in the UK with businesses and with partners across the region to take a strategic approach to deliver more diversified and secure supply chains while raising standards and mining more responsibly. So to close, I just want to thank RUSI for making it a priority to bring us together to discuss how the UK, Latin America, and our wider partners and allies can work together even more effectively for our shared security and prosperity. I've sensed a real appetite for this from our partners across the region, but I want all of us here in the UK to be ambitious about what is possible when we work with Latin America. And I want us all to recognise the importance of Latin American leadership in changing what is possible at a global level as well on the challenges and opportunities we face. Sure, this government here can improve our economy, we can do better on our security and our borders. We can do our bit to reduce carbon emissions and support work against climate change. We can do that without changing our approach to Latin America. But how much better and how much more successful and how much more secure any gains that we make will be if we work alongside our partners and our allies in Latin America now and in the years ahead. Thank you.
Minister, thank you so much for getting our conference off to a great start and covering, I think, probably most of the issues we're going to return to in more detail during the day. It's a really comprehensive account, and I think gave a real sense of the breadth of UK involvement across Latin America. I think I'm not sure, I lost count of the number of countries which you indicated that the UK was involved in, but it was certainly a very large proportion of the countries in the region. I suppose I wanted to start by asking maybe a big picture question, which is at RUSI, when our analysts look at developments on a global level, there's often an argument by some that we are at a major turning point in geopolitics. It's a contested proposition. Some people say actually that's not the case. But certainly some people argue that for a number of reasons, some of the things we've taken for granted for a long period are beginning to dissolve. We've got the United States, which initial indications under the new administration seems to be going a rather different way in terms of its attitude towards international law. And you indicated at the beginning of your presentation some of the issues in relation to Panama. But more broadly, we have the emergence of an intensifying rivalry between the US and China, which third countries are trying to navigate. And of course, we've got an ongoing war in Ukraine, which raises real questions about Russia's place in not only in Europe, but more broadly. So the question, I guess, is, I mean, this is not the moment for a wider discussion of all those issues, but I guess the question in relation to UK-Latin America relations is, should we be planning on the basis of more or less business as usual, doing more of the sort of things we've been doing already, or are there ways in which we've got to prepare for rather more radical developments and work together? And perhaps if one is in an optimistic mood, the fact that maybe neither of us is entirely comfortable with either the US or even less China being dominant, is actually an opportunity for other countries, important countries in Latin America and Europe, to work more closely together.
I mean, there's a lot in that, isn't there? I think the way I look at this is clearly things are changing. Is it I think we've had many turning points in recent years that you could point to now looking back. But the important thing for the UK government is that we don't just observe these things, but we are active and we shape our own future. And one of the reasons that I'm so keen that we prioritise Latin America, perhaps more than we have, is that Latin America is a place where the Americans care deeply about what happens. Well, they ought to. I don't think they probably have enough sometimes, or they've cared sometimes in the wrong ways. China is very active in Latin America. Russia is increasingly active in a very interesting way in Latin America. And we should be. We really should be, because there is so much opportunity, and we don't have some of the historical hurdles to overcome, if I can put it that way, with many nations in that part of the world. We are seen as a trusted partner. They wish to do business with us. The hand is extended, and it is up to us how we respond. And I feel very strongly that because of critical mineral opportunities that there are there, which are going to have to be exploited. But while the minerals must be exploited, those countries that possess them must not. And we must work in a way that enables countries in Latin America, like Chile where I was recently, to get more of the value and to engage in processing and more of the value that is added to those products in their countries. And that's in our interests. Why is that? Because that means that we have a stronger, deeper partnership with Chile and those companies, but it means the production is more stable, it means that it is safer, it makes us a partner of choice, which is in our interest because we need to make sure our supply lines are secure. So there are many reasons for us to be more active and more engaged that are in our own self-interest. But actually, if you're interested in a part of the world that your ally is interested in also, you've got something in common. You've got a shared agenda. That's a very powerful thing. And that's something that perhaps we haven't managed to achieve as much as we could have done in the past. And I think Latin America is a massive opportunity for the UK to show that different way of working.
Super. Thank you very much indeed.
There we are. We started now.
We have.
Yeah,
We've
okay.
absolutely started. I'm going to throw it open now to questions from the floor. If you could raise your hand and I will get somebody to take a mic to you. The gentleman right here. If you could stand up and introduce yourself before asking your question.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Captain Javier Bermudez, Colombian Naval Attaché here in London. Worldwide, the cocaine users are more than 23 million people around the world. The top 3 countries, it's United States, UK, followed by Australia. And Colombia is one of the most important producers of cocaine. That's why we're developing one of the most important multinational strategy called Horizon, that involves around 62 countries, 129 institutions, and more than 15 agencies working together in this regard. The last naval campaign, which is the 14th campaign, we seized more than 1,400 tons of cocaine and more than 500 people take it to jail for that reason. From your point of view, what other efforts we have to do as a multinational effort strategy to contain this phenomenon? Thank you very much.
I mean, your point about, and I think I made it too in my remarks about demand, I think it's really important. My sense is that there is more that we could be doing here on demand for cocaine, because the misery that you see in Colombia on the back of this trade is feeding the habits of people here in the UK. And I know there are people who will not buy palm oil. They care deeply about deforestation. They will drive an electric vehicle and they will take a couple of lines of cocaine on a Saturday night, which is bringing death and destruction to your country. And I think we have a duty to deal with that. We do. As well as that, we have a duty to work as closely as we ever have done with your incredible investigators and law enforcement service in Colombia on, yes, the seizures, and the Royal Navy have done an amazing job on seizures, as have others, and as you rightly highlight. But actually, the more we seize and the more we disrupt, this is just the cost of doing business for a lot of these guys. They build it in to their business planning, and we've got to get at where the manufacturers, the distributors, where's the money going, who is hiding that money, how is that money being laundered, where does it end up, and we've got to get much more active in that space. We're doing that, we're getting the tools, we're getting our legislative framework in shape so that we can do that more effectively, but we'll never do that well unless we cooperate as closely as we can. So I think we just need to do more in our sort of financial services and our cyber security cooperation. That will help, but this is going to be constant battle. So I think the closer we can work together on that, the better.
Super. Right, other questions? The lady in the front row.
Thank
Giselle Gamble, Chief of Staff at the Henry Jackson Society. You mentioned the UK's recent accession to the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, the CPTPP. Would you be able to speak a little more about what sort of opportunities you hope this might bring to bear? And if I may, you also mentioned that Russia has been increasingly active in the region recently. And you said that that was in interesting ways. Would you be able to just elaborate a little on that, please?
I'd probably be sacked on the spot for elaborating too much on that. I mean, I go to Mexico City and I see the work that our amazing British Council does in Mexico, absolutely fantastic. And then I see the investment that Russia is making in a cultural centre in Mexico City. Now, why are they doing that? You know, they're doing it because they want to provide an alternative set of values to the ones that we want to share. You know, and they do it because it works, and they're good at it. We've got to compete with that, and it's about disinformation. It's about making sure that people get access to accurate information, accurate news, that they're not being manipulated. These are the games and the destabilizing activity that Russia is very effective at. So that's what I mean by that, among other things. On the CPTPP, I think it's very early days. You know, I was somebody who had their doubts about leaving the EU, and I think that it's difficult to mount an argument that says that CPTPP is in any way going to compensate for the loss of frictionless trade that we've experienced over the last few years. However, we are where we are. It is a great opportunity, and we have to try and make the best of it. I don't know yet. I don't think anyone can really tell you exactly what sectors and how these opportunities are going to benefit the countries of the agreement. But I think, you know, we believe in free trade. The more of it, the better. This is going to help. It brings us closer. So let's work together to try and find ways to benefit from it. And I think that's our task that we have now.
Great. The gentleman here.
Thank you very much, Minister. Noel Hadjimichael from the Defence and Security Circle in London. Minister, you mentioned doing more, and that was very pleasing. I'm interested in also the dependability of Britain in terms of the diversity of issues. Does Britain want to see Latin America more engaged in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, on bigger issues, things that may not be in their backyard, like the Quad? Very much so, can Britain help Latin America play a bigger role globally?
I think that we're at a point where Latin America needs to decide for itself what role it wants to play. And actually, my experience is that we have some great partners in Latin America on the world stage. What issues they want to get involved with, what posture they wish to take, is clearly a matter for them. But I am struck by the solid support that we've seen on Russia-Ukraine, about the thoughtful way that many countries have responded to the conflict in the Middle East, to the way that the events in Venezuela, that the reaction to that has largely been regionally led and values-based, and I think that's impressive and to their credit. So I think that there is an opportunity, should they wish, for more Latin American countries to be even more prominent and to take more of a leading role on the world stage. And we've got every reason to welcome that.
Very good. Right. Who have we got? A chap here.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Minister. Ewan Grant, United Kingdom Defence Forum. I'm a former RC intelligence analyst covering the ex-Soviet states and transnational organised crime, so I certainly did pay attention to your guarded comments about Russia. My question is about a possible role for the UK as a third country in working with the Latin American countries collectively and bilaterally on relations into Europe. You mentioned financial crime and financial investigations, because we've now got the EU anti-money laundering authority coming up. Done properly, that will be a big step forward. But I've seen the dark side of EU or central organisations. They're not always done properly. Corporate governance can be very much lacking. And I think there's a huge risk, but there's also a huge opportunity. And maybe it's one, can the UK, with obviously the City of London and Five Eyes, play a huge part there? Thank you.
I mean, very much so. We have to, as you say, with the city. You know, to be fair to the last government, which I'm not very often, but you know, some work was done in the right direction on this, and I think we need to, you know, that baton's been received, and we need to do a lot more. But again, you know, this does come down to, yes, we have to get our house in order, and we have to work closely with our overseas territories, and we need to make sure that our company's house is, you know, where that needs to be, that our financial regulation is how we want it. But none of this works without close cooperation with international partners. And I think that's something that we've all been forced to confront, probably, you know, increasingly, but the big jolt it has been since Russia-Ukraine, and the way that we've now got control over our own sanctions regime has made us have to increase our capacity and our ability to be able to do that work effectively. I think that this is now, it's something that the Foreign Secretary cares very deeply about, and he's spoken about at length, and I know that he wants to play more of a leading role in that as well. So, you know, I think it's a bit like the narcotics trade in a way, in that when do you say you're done? You know, we are in a space race with these people who are finding new ways with cryptocurrencies and various ways of exchanging their money that we're constantly having to catch up. But we recognise that challenge, and we are working with whoever we can and whoever we need to make sure that we make the progress we need.
Very good. Gentleman here.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm Vinicius de Carvalho from King's College London and Associate Fellow here at RUSI. One question regarding or considering the strong partnership and friendship between UK and US. Since the inauguration, President Trump is making strong declarations about the Panama Canal. I would like to ask what would be the position of UK regarding these declarations and the situation around the autonomy or the sovereignty of Panama regarding the canal. Thank you.
I mean, I met the Panamanian foreign minister on the week of the inauguration. And I'm supposed to be in Panama today, but because we had some votes last night, I wasn't allowed to go. However, my
But it's our benefit.
grief over that will pass. But what the Panamanians said to me was they're taking it seriously, but not literally. And I think that we could do a lot better, a lot worse rather, than be guided by that. So clearly we have well-established positions on territorial integrity, and you know that should not need to be stated. But I don't think that the Panamanians have enjoyed being the focus in the way that they have. They're very confident about the centrality of the canal to their constitution and their responsibility in operating it in a fair and to be fair, as they do. So I think I am guided by the Panamanian government, and their words of seriously but not literally, I think, are very wise.
Very clear. Well, the fact that you weren't able to go to Panama is to the benefit of this conference. So, if not Panama, so any other questions? I'm just, the gentleman here, yes, please.
Hello, I'm Leon Serva from TV Cultura, Brazil. I wonder what could be the position of the United Kingdom regarding Venezuela if the government adopts a more aggressive position against Guyana?
So we are appalled by what has happened in Venezuela. The people of Venezuela should get the government that they elected, which is not what has happened. The fact that you now have 8 million Venezuelans on the move across Latin America. You have people being imprisoned for their political activities in Venezuela. And the tragedy that such a country that should be so prosperous and has such is of such beauty and industry is that this is happening to them. I think we are all trying to work out the right way to respond in order to have the effect that we want, which is the restoration of democracy in Venezuela. So we work closely with the opposition and we listen to what they say and we speak to them. We take positions that we think will help because we don't want to take positions to make us feel good. We want to take positions that will ideally have an impact on the ground, so we are very mindful of that. The 10th of January we made our new sanctions announcements, and we will, we'll do more if we need to do more, and we will work alongside our partners and allies in the region as we progress through that. It is very difficult, I think, at the moment to see how this changes in the way that we want in the near term. But as the opposition said to us, we need you to stay hopeful, to stay engaged, to remain active, to be clear that those sanctions are not going to be lifted, as Maduro said that they would be to his allies in the regime in order to gain support. So, we are everything that we want to see. We will take positions and we will calibrate our language in order to achieve change, and not just to take a posture because we feel, however angry and determined we are, we've got to be mindful of the impact this has on the ground and make sure that we're thoughtful about the way we proceed.
I think on that somber...
That is quite a sad way to end,
It's a somber note, but I think a serious note, and I think a very welcome indication of the seriousness with which the UK government takes its relations with Latin America. We share many concerns with the countries of Latin America, and the UK is committed to work with its partners. I mean, I was very struck at a number of occasions where you emphasised the importance of listening to what Latin American governments are saying and using that as a starting point for a discussion of how we can work more closely together on security issues, but also on economic issues, both of which are incredibly important. I think on that note, if I could ask you all to join me in thanking the Minister. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great job. Thank you.